A robotics startup just proved that everything we thought we needed to build robots was fundamentally wrong. Here's the wild part. They took a quadrupedal robot, fine-tuned a general AI model on just 8 minutes of real-world data, and it navigated a busy office with people walking around, avoiding obstacles and people, all without being specifically programmed for any of it. That's not possible with the old method. Compare that to how it used to work. Companies would spend months collecting hundreds of thousands of hours of robot footage, writing custom code for each specific task, basically hard-coding instructions into silicon for every single scenario. General Intuition, the startup behind this breakthrough, raised $320 million at a $2.3 billion valuation, and they're not building robots themselves. They are building the foundation model that makes it 10 times easier for everyone else. This is the ChatGPT moment roboticists have been waiting for, and it just arrived. The same scaling playbook that worked for large language models is now working for physical robots. And that changes everything about when robots start showing up in factories, warehouses, and eventually in services we actually use every day. This is how robotics went from stuck to unstoppable. For 50 years, robotics has been trapped by a fundamental problem that nobody could solve. Every robot needed to be purpose-built for its specific job. Want a robot to assemble phones? You'd spend months writing software, collecting huge data sets, training a model just for that one task. Want the same robot to inspect solder joints? Start over from scratch. The data problem was the bottleneck. You needed hundreds of thousands of hours of video from the exact real-world scenario you were building for, which was incredibly expensive and time-consuming. That's why Boston Dynamics could build impressive robots that did parkour and backflips, but couldn't scale them to solve actual industrial problems. The engineering overhead was massive. Each new task meant a new training pipeline, new data collection, new validation. Then something shifted. The people at General Intuition looked at what happened in AI over the last few years and thought, what if we approached robotics the exact same way? What if instead of collecting real-world robot data, we trained on something that's unlimited and already captured millions of hours of human movement and decision-making? And here's where it gets interesting. They didn't look at videos of humans. They looked at video game data. Here's the insight that changed everything. Video games are simulation environments where millions of players perform millions of actions, navigating spaces, responding to obstacles, making real-time decisions in dynamic environments. It's a goldmine of spatial temporal training data. General Intuition trained their foundation model on millions of hours of game footage, capturing all those player inputs and camera movements. This gave the model an intuitive understanding of how to move through space, react to obstacles, plan paths around moving objects, all learned from watching gameplay. When you fine-tune this model on just 8 minutes of actual robot footage, the robot already understands the fundamentals of spatial reasoning. It's not learning from scratch, it's applying what it learned from games to the real world. This is the same insight that made transformers work for language. You don't need massive labeled datasets for every application. You need one good general model trained on enormous amounts of unlabeled data, and then you adapt it with minimal real-world examples. The robot didn't need hundreds of thousands of hours of real-world training footage. 8 minutes was enough because it already knew how to move. The innovation here isn't the robot body or the motor control. It's recognizing that embodied AI follows the exact same scaling laws that governed large language models. Bigger models trained on more diverse data, then adapted with minimal task-specific fine-tuning. That's the playbook. That's the moment. So what can the robot actually do? Here's where it gets real. General Intuition showed footage of a quadrupedal robot. Think of it like a four-legged dog-shaped platform operating in a dynamic office environment with people moving around, chairs in the way, obstacles everywhere. The robot navigated through all of that without hitting anything, without requiring any hard-coded obstacle avoidance, without being programmed specifically for that environment. It was using zero-shot transfer, the jargon for I haven't seen this exact scenario before, but I have the fundamentals to handle it. The robot was using just a single front-facing camera, making real-time decisions about where to move. 8 minutes of training footage from that specific office environment was all it needed to adapt. Imagine what that means at scale. A manufacturer in Japan buys the same robot platform that a distributor in Germany has. Both of them fine-tune the model on their specific warehouse for 8 minutes each, and suddenly both robots work in their environments. No month-long engineering projects, no massive data collection campaigns, no custom software teams. Just download the foundation model, film your space for a few minutes, done. The robot showed it could navigate in crowded office spaces, which is actually harder than a controlled factory floor because the variables are infinite. Different people, different paths, different obstacles every single run. If it works in that chaos, it works everywhere. And that's the difference between a robotics company and a robotics platform. This is where the comparison gets interesting. You've probably seen videos of other robots, Boston Dynamics Spot, Tesla's Optimus, Figure AI's demo videos. Those are incredible engineering achievements, and they're actually all building better robot bodies. But here's the fundamental difference. Those companies are still using the old playbook. They're collecting their own data, training their own models, building their own systems from scratch. General Intuition isn't competing with them on robots. They're competing with them on the foundation model layer, the thing underneath that makes all robots smarter. Think of it like how OpenAI didn't need to build ChatGPT to replace every customer service team in the world. They just built the foundation model, and now thousands of companies are building applications on top of it. That's what General Intuition is doing for robots. They trained on millions of hours of game data, created a model that understands spatial temporal reasoning, and now they are saying, here's the foundation. You build the robot. The ChatGPT moment in robotics isn't about a specific robot getting really good. It's about foundation models making it possible for hundreds of robotics companies to compete without needing the resources of a Tesla or Google. That's the change. Every robot company in the world just got access to a starting point that's way better than collecting their own data. The playing field flattened overnight. Here's what changes when robotics has its ChatGPT moment. The timeline for deployment accelerates dramatically. We've been hearing robots are coming to manufacturing for 10 years without seeing it happen at scale because every new deployment was expensive and slow. Now, if you have a warehouse or factory and you want to automate a task, you don't need a 2-year engineering project anymore. You download the model, get a few minutes of your specific footage, and you've got a robot that works. That means deployment timelines drop from months to weeks. Companies that couldn't afford custom robotics projects suddenly can. The market explodes. General Intuition's $2.3 billion valuation reflects how much the venture community believes in this. That's not for building better robots, that's for building the foundation model that every robot company will build on top of. Think about the addressable market. Every warehouse in the world, every factory, every logistics center, every place where repetitive physical tasks happen. There are millions of locations. Even if robotics penetration hits just 10% of those over the next 5 years, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of new robots deployed, each one using General Intuition's model. That's the bet. The timeline for a robot economy changes from 2035 to maybe 2028 or 2029. And that's just the industrial side. Service robots, delivery robots, home robots. Once the foundation model works for one domain, adaptation to others gets easier. This is the moment robotics industrializes. So here's how you should think about robotics news from this point forward. Every robot company announcement, every startup launch, every new demo, you're going to start seeing them all through this new lens. The question isn't, is this robot impressive? It's what foundation model are they building on? General Intuition isn't alone. You're going to see other companies train foundation models on different types of data. Maybe someone trains on real factory footage instead of game data. Maybe someone specializes in humanoid body robots or quadrupeds or robotic arms. The competition will be on whose foundation model generalizes better, not on whose robot body is cooler. Watch for which companies get early adoption from the robotics ecosystem. If you see a startup building on General Intuition's model and shipping real products, that's a signal the foundation is actually working in production. Watch for the speed of deployment. If companies really are going from model download to working robot in weeks instead of months, that's the inflection point proof. Watch for geographic expansion. Robotics tends to be clustered in Singapore, Japan, the United States, and Europe. But the real game is when a company in India or Brazil or Mexico can download the model and deploy robots cheaper than anyone else. That's when the market truly globalizes. The next 3 years will tell us if this was hype or if we are actually watching the beginning of robot everywhere automation. This is the robotics revolution everyone's been waiting for, and it just quietly happened. For decades, people asked, when will robots change the world? And the answer was always maybe, when we figure out how to train them better. General intuition just answered that question. The ChatGPT moment for robotics isn't about a single impressive robot or a company shipping the first perfect humanoid. It's about the foundation model layer becoming accessible and good enough that thousands of companies can build on it. That changes the economics of automation forever. It transforms robotics from luxury technology for massive companies to practical tools that any company can adapt. The real story isn't that general intuition built a good model. It's that the entire industry is about to change underneath you. And in 3 to 5 years, you're going to look around and robotics will be everywhere. Warehouses, delivery systems, maintenance, inspection. The boring stuff that costs companies billions of dollars to do manually. And it'll all trace back to this moment when someone had the insight to train a foundation model on video game data and prove that embodied AI follows the same rules as language AI. Watch how fast this adoption accelerates. Follow General Intuition's announcements. See who builds on their platform. The robotics economy isn't coming. It's starting now. Stay ahead of it.